From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Hello, welcome again. Today we are going to be joined by Saga Enjeti from the Daily Caller, who will offer young and whippersnapperish takes, but he's also a great journalist. Anyway, on that note, we will get to our first issue. Issue 1, the Battle of CPAC.
People that treat us well, we treat them well. People that treat us badly, we treat them much worse than they can ever imagine. That's the way it has to be.
Though less bloody than the Second Punic War, just outside Washington this week, conservatives did battle over CPAC. Shorthand for the Conservative Political Action Conference. CPAC is an annual gathering of conservatives from across the nation. But while President Trump had high praise for the American Conservative Union, which organizes CPAC, some conservatives aren't so happy. They lament what they say is CPAC 2018's ethno-nationalist and less inclusive message. As evidence for these accusations, they point to a speaker roster that includes controversial figures such as David Clark, Sebastian Gorka, and Marion Le Pen, niece of Front National leader Marianne Le Pen. But note this, one planned CPAC speaker, Dinesh D'Souza, had his invitation withdrawn after he attacked victims of the Parkland school massacre on Twitter.
Patrick, is this proof that a civil war in the conservative movement is underway, or something other than that?
It's over, Tom. The Bush party has become a Trump party. What the Republican Party is basically, it is a Reagan party on issues like taxes and guns and judges and things like that. It remains that. However, on the new issues, the populist conservative issues, control of the border, immigration, economic nationalism versus free trade, staying out of foreign wars that get us entangled and bleeding and accomplish nothing, America first, it has become a Trump party now. And by and large, the Congress of the United States and Trump, I think, are working well together. There's some rough edges and things like that, but we're at Appomattox.
Well, in 2016, Pat Buchanan wrote in the American Conservative that conservatives were beginning to look like Syria with all of the factions. Well, Assad has basically won in Syria, and Trump has basically won here.
What a combination that is! Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And CPAC is underwritten by the NRA at a time when the NRA is under scrutiny and great numbers of the American people are turning their backs on this gun lobby. And so it's pay to play.
Yeah.
People pay to get those platforms at CPAC. There was no serious discussion of issues. It was a bunch of faux populists, ethno-nationalists, and people who were basically discredited on the national stage. It was a parade of horribles.
We have a dichotomy there.
Well, let me resolve everything and say, first of all, congratulations, Pat. As I've said before, the party of Trump is the party of Buchanan. Trump came into it without ideology, and when he does express it, he tends to lean toward Buchanan. You had the Buchanan fence, he's got the wall, and you go right down the line. And but conservatives are not united. Conservatives are not this always happens with CPAC. There's always something dividing. And I think that's fine,
Clarence,
on the right and the left.
I want to ask you something. Do you think, though, that for the Bill Kristol side of the conservative movement, perhaps...
Yes, what I call the thinking conservatives.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Pat might disagree with that one.
Well,
but do you think that their best opportunity here is Russia, if that in some sense brings down the president, or to try and reinvigorate that narrative of free trade?
I don't think conservatives can get any glee out of dividing their own movement further, but the division is there. We haven't straightened out Russia. This is a crazy America to me now, that suddenly the FBI is viewed as a subversive force, and Russia is something for us to be allies with. That's a very tricky situation, but the fact is, as you get bigger, just ask the liberals, as you get bigger, it becomes harder and harder to keep your herd together.
Yeah, but they're not bigger, actually.
I'm going back a few years.
Right, okay.
Saga, what do you think's going on here?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, but the idea that CPAC has not always been really a pay-to-play organization for quite some time. You know, there's always been a place in which you donate a lot of money, you get primetime speaking. Right. Tom and I were discussing this earlier, but you know, we had the Open Skies Agreement, which was discussed at the CPAC so loudly because somebody wrote a $150,000 check. And at the same time, this is a conference for kids. I mean, you know, these people, these are Twitter consumers, and so Sheriff Clark, you know, a lot of these far-right personalities, they have hundreds of thousands of people, and they're very provocative.
But how much are they the intellectual base of the party now, or
is that the
Twitter?
purpose of CPAC? Is the purpose there to be the intellectual, you know, breeding ground? Isn't that, you know, that's Pat's job on the magazine
and the answer is,
and the Weekly Standard?
Let me talk about the movement. Look, the movement is very mature. It started up with Goldwater. It's 50 years old now. You've got economic conservatives, you've got budget balancers, you've got tax cutters, you've got neocons, you've got paleocons, you've got libertarians. In my father's house, there are many mansions, okay?
Yeah.
And there's disagreements all inside it. But it's a mammoth movement, and by and large, it is united and remains inside the Republican Party. With regard to Crystal, he's a neocon and a never-Trumper. Excuse me, you know, we're not going to march. We're not going to march again. And
but the times they are a-changing, and to be cheek to jowled with the National Rifle Association.
We've been there for years.
A week after a devastating tragedy in Florida. They've been there for years. If they want to stay with the years, they're going to lose all the young people who weren't at CPAC.
I don't know. I mean, the young people seem pretty happy about it.
But
When I was there,
conservatives, but they are minorities, no doubt about it. On social issues, many of the millennials aren't with us. But come to think of it, right to life, the conservatives are getting stronger.
Exit question. Very exciting one indeed. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Hannibal's generalship in the Second Punic War, and 1 being the moral treatment of civilians during that same war, how brutal will conservative feuding get in the next year? Pat, 1 to 10, 1 to 10.
You think we got a Kane coming, huh?
Maybe.
1 to 10? I think there's going to be a battle in 2020, I think, or could well be for the nomination.
Give me a number.
But there was going to be united in 2018. So there's 1 or 2. There's no grave battle inside the Republican Party.
I think it's 3 or 4. The battle comes after 2018 if the resistance delivers and the Republican Party is devastated.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump's doing an excellent job of keeping the movement together for his sake, because he'll change his personal views anyway.
What's your number
on the compass? I think a 2 as far as real turbulence is concerned.
Yeah, I'm at 2 as well. Trump won. This is his party, and his, you know, this economic nationalist agenda it's here to stay. It's not going away.
I think it's 2, but on the Battle of Cannae, interestingly, Hannibal, great there, played the Russians, the Romans at their own game. Let them in and encircle them. Maybe that's what Trump's doing. Anyway, issue 2, Trump's plan.
Should have been one school shooting, and we should have fixed it. And I'm pissed, because my daughter I'm not going to see again.
Listening to a father who lost his daughter in the school shooting in Parkland, Florida last week, President Trump promised action. And the next day, Trump outlined his plan for new gun control legislation. First, the president believes that specially trained teachers should be allowed to carry firearms on school grounds. This, he tweeted, would help prevent a quote-unquote savage sicko from carrying out successful school attacks. Second, the president wants to restrict mentally ill individuals from purchasing firearms. Third, Trump wants a federal ban on bump stocks, which allow for rapid rates of fire. Fourth, Trump wants to raise the eligibility age for semi-automatic rifle purchases to 21.
Clarence, is the NRA going to back these proposals, or is Trump deluding himself in suggesting that they will?
The answer is a firm yes and no.
Okay.
because the NRA has already banned bump stocks at their own shooting ranges, but they don't want the government to ban them nationally. What does that tell you? No, the fact is that, first of all, Tom, we got to say something about that father at the beginning of that clip. Yeah. That was the most powerful moment of the week for me and anybody else who's got an ounce of humanity.
And I think for Trump as well, actually.
Well, the one thing you didn't show was that the day he was looking for his daughter, he was wearing a Trump 2020 T-shirt. This is a Trump supporter. This is not some liberal coming in saying blah, blah, blah. This is a disappointed Trump supporter, very disappointed. He's been let down because
he's been let down by Democrats as well, though, hasn't he?
Well, everybody. You know, he says he wants, people need to do something. Well, the fact is, all the ideas you just expressed are already enacted in some states around the country. These are not new ideas. But the fact
so
is,
why
the
not
whole
leave it to the
debate has been
states? Why not
frozen.
leave it to the states?
Because leaving it to the states means the NRA is controlling the national debate. And that's what's
let me
been
tell you
happening
about
for
leaving
20
it to the
years.
states. I think look, many of these teachers we don't want our guns in the school. I don't want to carry them. They shouldn't have to. And they shouldn't have them in the schools. But there are people in states that say, look, we believe in guns, and we've got a retired cop, we want to put him in school.
Right.
Let the community, the schools decide
well,
individually.
Those are states,
don't force it on them.
Those are states where concealed carry is allowed, and I think that will be. But you cannot force teachers to go undergo training.
Right, and the president has said, though, he doesn't want
But the
that.
president is basically doing the work of the NRA because he's giving lip service to these very modest measures, and I'll take every one of them. I hope they can pass them. But then he diverts the discussion to arming teachers, and we all talk about that when we all know that's not going to happen.
Everybody
it's
agrees.
a master of diversionary techniques.
Saga, I want to ask you one
Sure,
question. Doesn't it make sense, though, as in Colorado, to allow teachers who want that training to be able to have that capability?
That's already happening.
But so why not expand it?
No, but exactly, and provide federal dollars towards it. But to say he's providing lip service to the NRA is just not accurate. I mean, the NRA came out against the raising the federal age to 21, and Trump went out on the CPAC stage and said, in an organization where the NRA had just written a massive check and said they are going to come along with us.
And the NRA is smart enough to know they can't hold that position.
They're not coming along.
There's some maneuvering room there.
They haven't said a word.
Excuse me, and then the governor of Florida has also come out for that. This is not Trump parading out there with some courageous stand on his own. You know, I'll take it, but we are in a moment of extraordinary potential change here. Watching Rubio, Senator Rubio on that stage, confronted by one of the Parkland kids saying, will you pledge not to take money from the NRA? He danced around.
Because he believes in the Second Amendment.
Look what happened down there.
The Second Amendment does not guarantee automatic rifles in everybody's
They're not talking about that, are they?
Everybody failed down there. The cops had 39 calls. The sheriff had 20 times. Everybody at the school knew he was a nutcase.
Right.
Nobody believes that guy should have had a gun now or any kind of weapon like that. Now, who failed to take it away from a guy who was clearly a real and present danger?
And on that note, let me ask the liberal side of the panel here.
Yes,
Do you think there is, one of the, I think, quite compelling conservative narratives is that if we're talking about more restriction, well, who is going to be the restrictor? The police, the FBI, who clearly have failed here to some degree. Can we trust government to handle this issue?
Well, we see who's supposed to be the restrictor, but there were failures. I think, Tom, it gets down to the fact that too many people want a panacea. They want a one-size-fits-all solution to everything. Fact is, you can have all the laws you want. If you don't enforce the damn laws, you're not going to get anything. But the fact is, the NRA itself, though, was not it was really a gun safety organization. It was only in the era after JFK's assassination that the NRA shifted their mission and became primarily a civil rights group, as they put it, because they had to be, because the public was so outraged over the guns all over the place.
We're beginning finally to turn the corner with revulsion at the fact that people should not be allowed to have military-style weapons that were created solely to kill people, lots of people, fast. There's no reason why anyone should have one of those.
Who's going to go out, if you're going to outlaw them, or we're going to just ban their production, ban their sale, they're going to go out into homes?
Actually, that can be enough. That could be enough because the production is so high.
I don't want to ask, wait.
No, that's the panacea.
Wait, Clarence, I want to ask you, isn't the issue, though, that...
Who's actually handled an Armalite rifle, by the way?
Yes, you have, and trained. And the Democrats, when they talk about banning semi-automatic handguns,
yes, sir,
a lot of Americans are not going to accept that.
You can't.
You know what they're talking about.
100 years old is a semi-automatic.
It's one thing to disallow, another thing to confiscate. That's what the NRA always says. They want to confiscate our weapons.
You want to stop
you don't
the
have
production?
to. If we would
the
just...
price goes up. You think this kid won't get one of these guns if he wants to commit suicide?
If I may just finish my statement, we have almost one person per gun in this country right now, or I should say almost one gun per person. Actually, thank you. And the fact is, if you can get them off the street, more and more of them off the street and
can
then stop the supply
buybacks.
into the street.
It's illegal in Maryland,
Then you
and
can
a kid last week who was arrested for a school shooting had an AR-15 with a hit list.
Chicago, you're from Chicago.
Exactly.
I am from Chicago.
They're
And you know
killing
what?
kids left and right with guns they're not allowed to have.
Wrong. The homicide rate is going down again, as it always does.
Still very high.
I heard,
Down from where?
I heard Ms. Loesch the other day
from
the NRA inflation of the numbers, and that's what they're doing. They always turn to Chicago.
Well, how about Baltimore? You try that.
Yeah, Baltimore's #1 now, and not
Okay.
Chicago. But
where
she didn't mention
are
Baltimore.
the
Why
guns?
didn't she mention Baltimore?
I'm bringing it to a close.
I want to say one thing.
10 seconds,
Because
quick.
you can't fix the entire problem doesn't mean you chip away in all these areas.
Thank you.
And I think that's what we're going to do.
But chip away
Thank
towards
you.
what? To an ultimate ban.
When we
No,
come
you
back,
gotta move in the
social
right direction.
conservatism and Syrian suffering. And tell your friends, at least for the moment, they can watch on McLaughlin.com from 1 p.m. on Sundays. We'll be right back.
March 10th, go all in at the 13th annual Chance for Life, DC's premier charity event hosted by MGM National Harbor, presented by Boeing. Featuring a thrilling charity poker tournament, a tasting experience with DC's top chefs, and Vegas-style party, Chance for Life directly benefits pediatric cancer research at Children's National and through Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation, because every child deserves a chance for life. For tickets and information, visit chanceforlife.net.
Issue 3, End of an Era.
Are you willing to receive Christ tonight? Because you may never have a moment quite like this again.
On Wednesday, at 99 years of age, Billy Graham died. A widely followed Christian Protestant evangelist, Graham's decades of public preaching saw him address hundreds of millions of people in hundreds of different nations. Advising many presidents and foreign leaders, Graham was an early and ardent supporter of the civil rights movement. Yet as he shaped American spiritual life and public policy, Graham was not without his controversies. In his statements on Jews, the Vietnam War, homosexuality and feminism, Graham's critics found evidence of prejudice, and Graham's lasting legacy seems uncertain. After all, in 2018, rising secularism has some evangelists fearing for the future.
Pat, do you think we will ever see a preacher of Billy Graham's reach and power again in the United States?
I don't think so. It's he preached, as they say, to more people than anybody in all of history. He was extraordinarily charismatic. I remember President Nixon, they used to talk about how he used anecdotes and stories. I was told, I won't mention the other fellow, that was only one of 2 people who can fill Yankee Stadium within 3 weeks' notice. One of them is Billy Graham.
Eleanor?
His presence was greater, I think, than what he actually said. I made a decision for Christ with Billy Graham in 1956 in Madison Square Garden. It lasted for about 2 hours, but he had made me and my girlfriend convinced we wouldn't make it back home to Queens on the F train if we didn't go down there and declare. Right. And here we were in Madison Square Garden where the circus had just been, and the stench was overpowering it. We started giggling before we got too deep, but I was on his mailing list for a good 20 years. Mm-hmm. And he was on the right side most of the time with civil rights. He was progressive, but he ushered in the sort of militant Christianity, political Christianity, yet he kept his distance. His son has taken that path, but Billy Graham...
He was not moral majority. He was
that's
not moral.
Right.
That was
that's right.
Falwell and Pat Robertson, I remember when that started. I think he was really a great man. He was an extraordinary success. Did he have some faults and flaws? Yeah. But look what he preached on homosexuality and things like that. Look, excuse me, that's straight in the Bible.
You know, we got to talk about
that's where he preached from.
Depends what part you read in the Bible.
Well, when we talk about faults and flaws, you have a hard time finding them with Graham. I mean, he was not an activist against gay rights. That's one thing, which I think is important. But it's significant to me. By the way, I took the walk for Graham at the New York World's Fair back in '65. Remember that? He had a Billy Graham pavilion there.
Right.
You know, I was coming out of high school. I was like, Billy Graham. Right. I finally got to shake hands with the man about a dozen years ago, over the press club, and it was a big moment. But okay, well, we can tell stories all day long. What's important is, at the end of his life, it's interesting. Billy Graham is being cited for the Billy Graham rule by Mike Pence and others, because he has a big impact on the Pentecostal church. The reason why Mike Pence won't dine with a woman who's not his wife is the old Graham rule. But inside the church, that meant a lot, because these traveling evangelists, a lot of them were giving a terrible reputation to the church, and the Graham rule helped to restore evangelism in this country. That one fell swoop.
Sure. Saga, do you think here that with Billy Graham, as much as there are some divided groups, he did speak to a spirituality and to an importance of values that matters very deeply to many Americans?
Yeah, and what's so fascinating about Graham, and I'm a younger person, is to see these people who transcend history, and there's just nobody else like that, especially on the evangelical right, who could counsel Barack Obama, President Eisenhower, and President Nixon be beloved on the right and have respect on the left. I mean, I was shocked when I was in the newsroom and I saw MSNBC carrying the Graham death and talking about his legacy with civil rights, and at the same time, I was just shocked. That rare moment in which we are all actually respectful of a person. Do you think we'll see another one? No, I don't. That age is done.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll come back to that. We're going to go on to our next issue, I think. All right. Issue 4, terror in Ghouta.
Moreover, Mr. President, the 2017 access levels were themselves nearly 40% below our access levels in 2016.
Addressing the United Nations Security Council this week, Mark Lowcock warned of a worsening humanitarian situation in Syria. Explaining that aid worker access to besieged areas is increasingly restricted, Lowcock fears that starvation and otherwise treatable medical conditions will take many lives. Central to the challenge is the decision by Bashar al-Assad's regime to limit aid access to civilian populations. Moreover, the regime is actively targeting hospitals and other civilian locales in an effort to crush the rebellion that opposes it. Just this week, hundreds were killed in airstrikes in the Damascus suburb of Ghouta. Suffering a regime chemical attack in 2013, Ghouta is a top regime target.
Is this an American issue? Does this ultimately, the world is dark and full of horrors as well as hope? I mean, should we be doing anything about this?
At this point, I mean, why now? We had Aleppo, we had the previous 5 years of the Civil War, 400,000 dead. In the reality, what are we going to do in order to alleviate this situation? Could we try and force some aid into the situation? Maybe, but half of the groups there are Islamist militias who want to kill us. Right. I mean, back in 2011, back in 2012, could a difference have been made? Maybe, but at this point, I mean, what is there to be done? We alleviate the civilians so that Al-Qaeda can control them? I mean, is that a win for us? Yeah. And then you have this barbaric butcher, Assad. At this point, I mean, Assad is consolidating his control. He's got Aleppo. He's got the majority of the major civilian populaces. What are we supposed to do here?
I think stop the killing. Look, Assad, the Russians, Hezbollah, Iran, there's the Shia from Pakistan and Iraq, all of them, they've won the war. The war's over, they've won the war.
Well, they haven't got north of the Euphrates, though.
The United States and the Kurds control 1/4 of the country, that quadrant up there. I think we ought to really work, and diplomatically, frankly, to put an end to the fighting and killing and give that Ghouta, give the people out of there.
It's a battle of the powers on the ground,
right.
And if the United
States, I want to ask
has
you a specific question,
the United States has any leverage there to work with Saudi Arabia and Russia.
But do you think the issue, though, Eleanor, is that the United States doesn't? You have to pressure the Russians to make concessions. You can't just sit down with them.
Right.
How?
Do you agree? Well, we have the Euphrates.
Well, let's start working diplomatically. Let's do something. Again, I think this president has basically just sat back and let everything get out of control.
But he did condemn it aggressively.
Well, he condemned it, okay.
Right, yeah, it's not likely to make enough of a difference, unfortunately. You've got to really pressure the Russians, otherwise they just ignore you. And
exactly.
That's what's happening.
The Russians got an investment here. I don't think they want to continue this war, keep it going like that.
But did you see what's happening?
The Saudis
what they would rather
Saudis and the Russians are where we should be able to exert some control.
Look, what the Russians want to do is they want to get out. They want it out as quickly as possible. They don't care a damn about human life, and so they're just going to to raze this place to the ground, and they want
They
want
want to retain their two bases there, their naval and air base.
Right, and that's it.
Yeah.
But what is interesting, though, I think, and again, I could bring back to that January 8th prediction. Trump did authorize that airstrike on the mercenaries who were Russian GRU, essentially cut out.
They warned those guys not to come in there repeatedly.
And now the Russians have deployed an Su-57. I mean, is the risk here?
Putin does not want a war with the United States. He has won the war in Syria. Why would you pick a fight with the United States?
To get the United States out, because at the moment he cannot consolidate us out.
You think the Americans will cut and run if he attacks us?
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
That was a shot across the bow. In reality, look, this is not going to spiral into a big conflict, but it's possible. It could become a major geopolitical crisis.
Where is our ambassador to Russia, John Huntsman? He's been confirmed. I haven't heard word one. Some aggressive diplomacy needs to be done with.
We ought to be talking to the Russians instead of calling them names because some trolls got into our election.
This sounds like the Trumpian foreign policy, doesn't it?
I think we have to do both.
This is not a Huntsman policy. This is an interesting combination of the two of them. They got a lot to resolve.
I do think, though, this is going to be, I think this is going to get bloody soon. Anyway, we will be right back with predictions between the US and Russia. I think that's going to come.
March 10th, go all in at the 13th annual Chance for Life, DC's premier charity event hosted by MGM National Harbor, presented by Boeing. Featuring a thrilling charity poker tournament, a tasting experience with DC's top chefs, and Vegas-style party, Chance for Life directly benefits pediatric cancer research at Children's National and through Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation, because every child deserves a chance for life. For tickets and information, visit chanceforlife.net.
Predictions, Pat.
Italian elections coming up. The five-star movement will come in first, create a political crisis for the EU.
Not Berlusconi, no?
No, Berlusconi will come in behind him.
All right, Eleanor.
Well, the Bible says the children shall lead us. And just as young people convince their parents, and we saw a rapid change in the acceptance of same-sex marriage, young people are also going to convince their parents in widening circles that guns need to be controlled in this environment.
Okay. Saga.
Democrats will not work with the president to pass any legislation on DACA, and the program will expire on March 5th, and there's going to be major political fallout on the left.
Wow. Okay. Clarence.
A reporter will ask President Trump about our Wakanda policy, and he will say we're looking into it, not knowing that that's really the fictional place where Black Panther comes from in the movie.
Okay. And have you seen the movie?
Not yet. I'm waiting. The lines are too damn long.
All right. Well, all right. Has anyone seen the movie here?
Not yet.
It's got good reviews.
Next week, we ought to talk about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I predict that in the next 3 months, H.R. McMaster will be replaced by John Bolton as National Security Advisor. And here's a random fact. 62 years ago today, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev repudiated Joseph Stalin's cult of personality and signaled a new era in Soviet politics. Thank you very much, panelists, for an exciting discussion. We hope you will watch us next week, and remember McLaughlin.com to reference your friends. But until then, make sure to follow us on Twitter at McLaughlin Group and our website, McLaughlin.com, where your friends can watch the show. And has everyone here, I hope, watched on McLaughlin.com? Because it's a beautiful website.
Wouldn't miss it.
We want to push that website. It's a lovely website.
I recommend repeat viewing, in fact.
Okay, well, very good. Okay, and I also think that, if we could combine perhaps the Black Panther and McLaughlin.com, Pat Buchanan might become a fervent fan himself.
Well, I think Clarence is going to do the lead on that movie when we get to
it. Your boy is in the mail.
All right, anyway.
Pat will do the return of Dirty Harry.
On that note, matinee. We will see you next week.